And hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you're at. My name is Nicholas Whitaker. I'm a training and development manager on the News Lab at Google, and we're here for another webinar covering specific topics that are relevant to journalists around the world today. We have a handful of guests today that are going to be talking specifically about the kind of current state of security risk for journalists in particular. We're going to introduce a handful of new features and tools that Google are providing, and also talk a little bit about what has been around and available for a very long time at Google, and hopefully give you a really good understanding of what you as a journalist or somebody that's working within the industry might need to know in terms of protecting yourself while online. I just want to introduce right off the top here our two guests. Dario, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, say hello, and
yeah,
what we're going to be getting into today?
Yeah, my name is Dario Salice. I'm a product manager here at Google, working on security topics around identity and privacy.
And Jamie Albers.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jamie, and I lead product marketing and development at Jigsaw, which is an Alphabet company. And we are a technology incubator working on a variety of security challenges.
Thanks, Jamie. And for those of you that are interested and want to learn more about both Jigsaw as well as the other advanced protection tools that are available at Google, there are links in the description of the YouTube video below. And also keep an eye out on our Twitter account and on our Medium account. Within the next week or so, we're going to have additional resources that are going to be coming out, including a post that's going to have a whole lot of additional resources, information, and even an opportunity to sign up for training later on in the future. So we'll get to all of that towards the end of the conversation today. There's also an opportunity for live Q&A. So if you have questions about safety and security or various different options that are available from Google to help protect you while you're online, definitely reach out to us on our YouTube channel. There's a live chat right there next to it. You should see it on your right-hand side there, and we'll take those questions as we can towards the end. With that, I wanted to kind of start the conversation off a little bit talking about, what is going on in terms of safety and privacy and security for journalists while online today. I think, when I go to newsrooms around the world and I do these trainings, I talk to people about things like two-factor authentication, or making sure their password hygiene is really good, or just making sure that they're being careful around things like phishing attempts or other types of things that might interfere with their security online. I think a lot of journalists that I talk to don't really recognize perhaps like where they sit within the security spectrum as far as like the risks that they're taking on with the types of jobs that they're doing. So maybe if we could just kind of start there, Dario or Jamie, either one of you, if you want to jump in and talk a little bit about it from your perspective. What are you seeing happening right now these days?
Well, I think it's a good point when you say people are not aware on the spectrum of risks they're on. I think we as humans struggle in general to assess risks, to assess the impact if something could happen. We also overestimate our own ability to make right judgments at any given point of time. I mean, the training you and your team are doing is super valuable. Knowing that you shouldn't click on links you don't know where they lead you to or where they're from is very important. But in addition to that, we see, even if people are educated, if people are aware of it, it just takes one little unaware moment where you click on something and then your account is compromised. So being aware is one thing, but putting the right things into place to protect from being tricked into clicking on the wrong link or on the wrong thing is equally as important. And it's not about admitting that one is not smart or good or educated enough. It's just protecting yourself from this moment where you're not aware.
I think it's a really good way of framing it. And I think too, part of this, it's not necessarily just about not knowing kind of what tools are available to you. I think also it's just an awareness of how you're approaching your activity online, just kind of understanding a little bit about, what you're working towards, or rather like what different types of things might be coming towards you that you need to be aware of. But these things are often changing on an ongoing basis. So, I think, perhaps Jamie, talk a little bit about Jigsaw and what your team does, and, some of the things that you've seen over the last many years that have evolved in this space, perhaps.
Yeah, so I think the biggest change for us, well, there's a few things, is that one, the physical and the digital are constantly at interplay, and that only seems to be increasing. So while things that may impact you offline can then have digital consequences, and vice versa, digital threats that may that you might be facing might then transpire into a physical realm. So I think that creates a lot of confusion, unfortunately, on how best to protect oneself. But making sure that you think about your digital security just as much as your physical security is becoming increasingly important. And what we've also seen is that it's becoming increasingly important for lots of people. This is when we first started, when Jigsaw first started going out in the field back in 2013 to meet with journalists and activists. We were often finding people, journalists and activists in places like, in parts of the world that we might sort of associate with sort of physical violence, maybe during an electoral context or something like that. And they were the first ones that were experiencing DDoS attacks and phishing attempts against their websites or their email accounts as ways for actors to gain access to information or shut down access to information. And as we've seen now, these problems are spilling over everywhere. So it doesn't really matter where you might be physically located. The digital challenges are faced by people all over. And so that's why it really is so important that everyone, no matter what your threat vector might be, it's really important to take care of your digital hygiene, just again, as you would your physical hygiene, no matter what.
Absolutely. So, I think with that, maybe that's a good kind of pivot to talk about some of the more recent features and options that have been made available. Dario, I know you have a recent announcement that was launched around advanced protection from Google. And there's a blog post that's actually, again, linked in the description of the video below. So if you want to learn more about that, definitely read through that blog post. I think it'll give you a really good framing of what's available. But Dario, if you could kind of go into it a little bit as well here for this audience and kind of explain to us what advanced protection is, and perhaps also what type of person might be most, could best take advantage of this type of a feature.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So why did we even go into this direction to offer something for at-risk users? Because over the past few years or year, one thing we notice is that there's a small subset of our population that is confronted with really highly motivated and skilled attackers. So people who want to compromise their account because of who they are, what they do professionally, how they're visible in the public eye, and in some cases also what type of information they expect to get if they compromise their accounts. So we decided to get a program in place to offer these highly targeted users the option to enroll into a more stringent and more stricter security settings as what we would offer to the general population. So the reason why we would do that is because the consequences for these users, if their accounts get compromised, would be significantly higher. That can range from financial loss, it can be damage of reputation, but it could also bring them into physical danger. So these users, if they decide that security of their account and the information which is in there is more important than the ultimate convenience, and they're willing to trade in some of that security with convenience, this is a program we highly encourage them to enroll. And one thing you mentioned before, well, who is this for? I mean, one of the audiences are journalists. One thing we see all over the world, journalists across the spectrum are being faced with targeted attacks for multiple reasons. It can be financial reasons. It can be people want to get a visibility of their sources or their activity. So especially journalists who might not have the infrastructure of large media companies see themselves confronted with attacks they don't know how to handle, and they don't have any way to deal with them. And this program is one of the steps where we want to raise the bar for the attackers to make it much more complicated, much more expensive and time intensive to get into their accounts.
That's great. Dario, before you could go on, would you just mind hitting present on your presentation so it goes full screen? I just want to make sure people that are on small screens can actually read the slides there.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sorry, go ahead and continue. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No worries. So how did we do that, or what did we do? Now as a launch, we launched on October 17th with this offering. We offer a series of protective features to help people defend against the most common and the most impactful attacks on their account. One of the most common things we see out there is people sending out phishing emails, trying to trick people to sign out in fake websites in order to get their usernames, their passwords, and if people have activated two-step verifications, they might try to gain access to the code. Some of them are sent via SMS or other channels to get into the account. One thing we do with advanced protection is we tell people to get security keys and will enforce security keys. What does that mean? It means that anytime an advanced protection user signs in on a new device, either a mobile device, a desktop device, a tablet, or whatever device they use to access their Google data, in addition to providing a username and the correct password, they will also have to provide the security key. So they have to prove that they own this security key and they're in possession of that. This gives the advantage that the security key is a physical device which can't be phished through a remote attack. So the attacker, even if they would get on hold of the username and the password, they couldn't get in your account because of the lack of availability of the security key. They couldn't get their hands on that. That's the first thing we do. In addition to that, we increased data protection for these users. So if users want to grant or being requested to grant access to email or to Google Drive data to non-trusted applications, they won't be able to do so. These non-trusted applications, they don't have to be necessarily insecure applications. They just are applications that don't support security key sign-in on their side, and thus it don't meet the level of security we need to get them. We see significant attacks out in the wild where people impersonate legitimate applications and send requests to users asking them to sign in into these applications to open a Google Doc or any other information which they might think is legitimate and they need access to. And this is a way where they gain the credentials. And another one is attackers who don't get access to usernames or can't access to passwords might impersonate the owner of the account in the account recovery flow and pretends that they lost their security key and or their password. Users who are enrolled into account advanced protection will have additional methods to identify these types of attacks. So they will be notified that somebody is impersonating them and initiated an account recovery claim, but also the account recovery process is more stringent on our side and will require additional information, which the attacker might not have access to at this point. And in the end, we don't assume that attackers will give up and do something else with their life than compromising accounts. They will raise the bar on what they are willing to do, what they're able to do, and then some of them will be able to invest more resources and more time into compromising these accounts, which for us means we'll have to adjust what we do to protect these accounts in order to keep the bar high and protect our users. Yeah.
Fantastic, Dario. So, I think part of this, there's a few things I would like to kind of pull out of this, and I think, for me, the biggest question then becomes, how at risk am I? Is something like advanced protection correct or appropriate for me as a journalist or as a reporter or as somebody that's working with at-risk targets? How does one go about kind of thinking about that? How would you approach this as a journalist to think about whether or not I'm an appropriate person for this type of tool?
I mean, one indication is if you see suspicious activity happening in your account. So journalists we talk to sometimes see password recovery requests coming in. So when somebody files a password recovery request, we will send a notification to the email and they see these requests coming in knowingly that they didn't initiate them. So this is an indication that somebody is trying to get access to your account for various reasons. Other things are getting increased emails which are suspicious and pretends to be from Google or other trusted brands, where people are trying to be tricked into providing their password to a third party. And in some rare cases, there is a message in Gmail which indicates on government-backed attacks, and these are indications that there is activity towards their accounts, which they should take very seriously and enroll into either at least two-step verification but in these cases, we recommend to enroll in advanced protection.
And what I've just actually pulled up on the screen here too is a link to the keyword blog post. There's a lot of information I think here in particular about kind of what the variety of different tools are that Google is providing, but in particular advanced protection and how this is kind of part of this larger cybersecurity awareness month. So if you haven't had a chance to actually go through and look at those posts from October, I think it's a really good kind of primer for those that might be interested. I know I've sent these to a lot of journalists, even friends of mine who maybe were not aware of kind of the full scope of the potential risks that they might be encountering. And I encourage you to do the same. Jamie, I think there's a lot of additional tools that are available here that we haven't really even begun to scratch the surface on. I think that a lot of people would understand the concept of, say, good password hygiene. Let's maybe start there a little bit and talk about what tools, various different options are available within Jigsaw to help you kind of suss some of this stuff out.
Yeah, sure. So I'll go ahead and present my screen as well. Can you see that? No, I don't think so.
Not yet. Getting close.
There you go.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, cool. I'll screen share now. So first, I'll just get into a little bit into what Jigsaw is, just because I'm not sure that everyone yet knows. So Jigsaw is a technology incubator within Alphabet, and our goal is to find innovative ways to use technology to make people in the world safer. And we're doing this specifically by building technology to tackle some of the toughest global security challenges facing the world today. So this includes things like thwarting online censorship, mitigating the threat of digital attacks, countering violent extremism, and protecting people from hate and harassment online. We have a tall order in the form of a moonshot, which is to end online repressive censorship, which could mean something like stopping anyone from shutting down access to information when they need it, by ending cyber attacks or silencing voices through hate and harassment online. So our goal is to make sure that those things don't happen. And when we build products at Jigsaw, we have a team of designers and researchers and data scientists and engineers who look to understand the threats, digital threats that users are facing. And one of our main areas of focus is understanding the threats of journalists and people like all of you here who are joining the Hangout today, because as we've seen over the years, journalists and activists and other similar groups are often the first to receive many of the threats out there. So as many of you probably have experienced, the landscape in journalism has changed a lot over the years. In the past, it took physical violence, as you can kind of see from this photo, which is of an Indian newspaper who was shut down a few years ago physically by people coming into the offices. But today, and yes, while this does absolutely still happen, a lot of attacks are happening digitally. Things like DDoS attacks, which take down access to information, phishing attacks, which are used to gain unauthorized access to documents and emails and things like that. And what we've also seen over the years is that the threat is particularly extreme for investigative journalists and those that are at the front lines of reporting on sensitive issues. And so that is sort of why a little bit of background on what Jigsaw is and why it exists. And we work really closely with a lot of the teams at Google to work on cybersecurity tools to help defend against a variety of digital attacks. So that's what I'm going to run through here, and I'll go through them fairly quickly. But one thing to keep in mind is that this is just a starting point, and there's lots that needs to be done in order to maintain your digital security, but hopefully this will be helpful as a first step.
And also, while you're pulling that next slide up, I just also want to remind the audience that, well, two things. First of all, we've also done a safety and security webinar previously on the News Lab, and there's additional information on that video. I'll link also to that video in the description of this one below. But also, if you are just joining us now, I've seen we've increased our number of viewers quite a bit over the last few minutes. Just wanted to remind folks that we do have a live chat going. Feel free to throw your questions in there, and we will be addressing those in just a few minutes.
Great, thank you. So first I wanted to start out by talking about DDoS and Project Shield. So DDoS, which stands for Distributed Denial of Service, is one of the more common types of digital attacks. And what this is, it's a very simple and inexpensive way. You can actually buy a DDoS attack online to take a website offline by overwhelming a site with fake traffic. And what we've seen is that it can be used to target critical information, investigative work, and to silence journalism and stop freedom of information, which is why it's so important that if any of you have websites, to make sure that you have some form of DDoS protection. We saw this many years ago when our team was out in the field, and we thought to ourselves, hey, you know, I think that Google has pretty good DDoS defenses. I think there's something that we can do here. And so we wanted to find a way to extend those defenses to protect news sites, human rights, and election sites, those that we felt were particularly vulnerable to DDoS attacks, but might not necessarily have the resources to be able to defend themselves. So that's why we created Project Shield, which is a free service that uses Google's technology to help defend against DDoS attacks. So the way it works is we use a technology called reverse proxy, which essentially lets us intercept bad traffic before it reaches your server, providing a shield, if you will, against would-be attackers. So I won't go too much into the technical bits since we have that information available on our website, which is at g.co/shield. And if you are a news site or any of the ones I mentioned, please feel free to apply and check it out as well. And we'd be happy to answer any more questions on this as well later. So something that Dario talked a lot about was phishing. And what we've seen is that phishing attacks are still surprisingly effective. And what it is it's really just an attempt to trick you into granting unauthorized access to your account or to infect your machine. So a common phishing strategy, what Dario was discussing, is to have it link you to a credible looking login page. And so you click on the link, and then you might type in your password and your username, and then an actor is able to use this login page to take that information or get access or get your account access to a malicious app or something like that. And then they can use that information, your username and your password, to log in to your accounts. And I think we all know how dangerous that is to have someone have your username and password. But fortunately, we have two products that can help defend against this. So one is Password Alert, which is a free Chrome extension that detects when you enter your Google password into any website other than Google's sign-in page. What it does is it immediately prompts you to change your password if you've typed it into a page that's not real, and then you can immediately go ahead and change it. So by changing your password, then you're obviously able to prevent if someone might have taken your password, to prevent them from actually accessing it, because your old password is no longer relevant. We also at Google have created something called safe browsing technology, and this is built in to Google Chrome and Google Search. And what it does is it helps protects devices by showing warnings to users when they attempt to navigate to dangerous sites or download dangerous files in either Search or Chrome. We also protect Gmail users by identifying dangerous links in email messages and showing warnings if a user clicks on them. So if you ever seen if you've been using Chrome or in Search, a warning that might say that there's, essentially not to visit that site because we don't think it's safe, click out and do not visit it. Please follow our guidance on this. And so that's it for as a little bit of an overview for phishing. And then to sort of reiterate what Dario was talking about in terms of using security keys, if someone steals your password, they could gain unauthorized access to your account, and that obviously can have grave consequences, especially for individuals like yourselves that are journalists and might be reporting on sensitive topics. They could steal people could steal your personal information. They could lock you out of your account, delete your emails, contacts or photos. There's lots of things that can go wrong if someone gains unauthorized account access. And what we really recommend is using security keys whenever possible, as SMS codes can really pose a security risk if there are concerns of your mobile device being compromised. So again, we suggest using security keys and then using an authenticator app. Google has one, but many other services as well, for backup codes with your two-step verification. And one thing as well is that lots of services now provide two-step verification. So if you have a security key, then you'll be able to use it across a variety of services that you might use, not just Google. So that is another incentive, hopefully, to invest in one. What we also see as well is that documents and weak passwords are a great way for hackers or a determined actor to gain access to your accounts. So Google Drive does have some built-in security features to help prevent this, specifically by allowing you to control who has access to any document you share, with what rights, and for how long. So there's lots of security settings built in that you can use to keep control over who has access to your documents. We also recommend storing documents on the cloud and send documents via links rather than as attachments to help maintain more control over who has access to them. And what we also see a lot, as Nick mentioned, is that weak passwords are a common trap we often all fall into. It's really hard when you have all these different services with all these different passwords to be able to remember which ones go with which site. And so we often fall into bad habits of using the same password on more than one account, or simply having an easy one that you might be able to remember. But it's really important not to use the same password across multiple accounts. Because if you imagine if someone gains access to your password on one account, they might be able to then use it to log into all of your other ones. And it's important to make sure that your passwords are unique, that you use a mixture of letters and numbers and symbols and all those basic things that we're told to do, but it's hard to remember all of them. But that's why we have Smart Lock, which is a password manager built into Chrome to make it easier for you to create and store unique passwords, so that this way you don't have to remember them. They will automatically be saved on the sites that you choose to save it for, and then this way you can take more time and be more judicious about the passwords that you create, because you don't have to worry about remembering them all the time. And we do also have a feature in Chrome that will auto-generate passwords for you to create long passwords that are unique. And so that's a feature that I use as well because it's really helpful. And again, password managers and these password generators there's lots of tools out there. So definitely take a look and research which ones might be right for you if you don't use Chrome or some of these other services that we mentioned. And then also something to watch out for as well is malware, which is any software, a mobile application designed to harm a computer, mobile device, the software it's running, or its users. Malware sites install malicious software in users' machines to steal private information, perform identity theft, or attack other computers, among other things. And if you visit a site, let's say if you visit any website, for example, there's a chance that a site that has malware could take over your computer and downloading software without your knowledge. So it's really important to make sure that you're keeping an eye out for this. So we have features in Drive and Chrome to also help defend against this. So in Chrome, it's similar as the phishing software, which is like the anti-phishing software, is a safe browsing technology. And if you see one of these alerts saying that we don't think this site is safe because it might have malware, close the tab and do not visit the site. And then in Google Drive, a great feature that we have is that we'll scan any file smaller than 25 megabits for viruses before they're downloaded. So those are two things that we have that I would definitely recommend using. And then I'm going to run through very quickly just some other tips that we have. Hopefully these are things that you guys at least know of, but hopefully this is a good reminder to do. But again, always keep your software up to date to protect yourself from vulnerabilities, and keep your internet browser, operating system plugins, documents, everything that you use up to date. There's also some basic best practices for protecting your mobile devices. So make sure you lock your screen. If you lose your device, you can locate your Android or iOS device and, essentially prevent anyone from accessing it. Make sure that you're thinking about every time you grant access to an app, that you're thinking about what kind of information that you're granting alongside of it. Definitely delete apps you don't use, and enabling device encryption can also be beneficial. Okay, and then last but certainly not least, something that we always recommend is just making sure you check your account security. So the one that Google has is available at g.co/security checkup, but lots of services provide this. So do this across all of your accounts, not just your Google one, and make sure that you know which apps have access to your accounts, and that everything is safe and secure. So that is it. And looking forward to any questions that you might have. And thanks again, everyone, for your time.
Jamie, that's great. Thank you so much for kind of summarizing all that. And you could go ahead and stop presenting. I'll be adding in all the URLs that Jamie just mentioned, including Project Shield and Password Alert and Smart Lock and Security Checkup and all the other ones in the description of the YouTube video. Also, like I mentioned before, keep your eye out for a longer piece on Medium that will be talking a lot more about a lot of these features and pointing off to different links that might be helpful or useful as you're kind of pursuing some of that. I'm going to turn it to the live chat, and I think that we've got a pretty good collection of questions here. I know some of these are probably touching things that we've already answered or provided some references to, but just kind of summarize for folks that may have joined a little bit late. Right up at the top, Light Lodges asks, and I think if I'm parsing this question correctly, what I think they're asking about are security standards for young media makers. So for folks that are just kind of just getting started in their career, or maybe early career, or maybe even later career, might not be paying attention to these types of things. We kind of talked about a suite of different tools that are available here. Let's talk about just like basic, very conceptual, like ways of thinking about approaching security standards. Like, what are the things that when you wake up in the morning before you go online, what are the things you should be considering?
I think I could start with a very basic recommendation. Go through your account hygiene. Do all the things Jamie mentioned in the presentation. If you still feel at risk and you think that you need more, enroll into a program like Advanced Protection. Keep your software up to date, and stick to 2SV at least to keep the easiest attack out of your account.
Jamie, anything you want to add on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what Dario said and say, yeah, just do the basics. I mean, you should think, it seems like there's a lot of different things that you need to be thinking about. But I think once you start doing it, you'll start to understand that it just becomes part of your habits. Like, you don't think about locking your door when you leave the house, you just do it. It's not a burden. You don't think about putting your seatbelt on when you're in the car, for example. So I think once you just start practicing some of these behaviors and start always using a security key, you'll realize that it's really not that big of a deal or an extra step out of your way, because you'll just do it every time. I mean, we obviously all do it here at Google and Jigsaw, so a security key is really just second nature to us now. So it's things like that. And I would say, like, invest in a security key, and invest in a few of these things, a few of these tools, like a password manager and things like that, that can really make your life a lot simpler, actually. And I think you might even think that, I think once you start using these things, you'll be like, oh, wow, I can't believe it took me so long to start doing it, because it's a lot easier, actually.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of just institutional resistance to like extra steps in order to get me to my information or get me into my account and things like that. I think what a lot of times people don't realize is like, what is that? A stitch in time saves 9 or something like that. You know,
Yeah.
if things really go haywire and somebody gets access to your account, the amount of time and stress and energy and heartache that goes into that experience, you know, just taking an extra couple of seconds to check your security key or one of your password managers, I think is a much better investment in time.
Mm-hmm.
Ren Laforme, actually from Pointer, who we have some training partnerships with. If you check us out on g.co/newslab, you'll see some of our advanced training mechanisms there. And Ren is actually helping to produce a lot of that. On the Pointer side, he actually has an interesting question. He says he's found that journalists can be a bit fatalistic about cybersecurity. You know, something along the lines of like, well, if the government or somebody else just wants your info, they're going to get in, or things like that. How confident should a journalist be that these steps will help, or that these different ways of approaching their security might help? And you know, how did you maybe respond to that kind of philosophy?
I think we're very transparent in how our features work and against what type of attacks these protective features we suggest work. I mean, there is no absolute security against anything, but we're constantly raising the bar, and we're super confident that with the basic security offering and with enhanced security features, we are in a good situation as it is now. So yeah, journalists should take a little bit of time to inform themselves how does these features work, against what do they protect them, and I think that gives them a good feeling on what the security level really is.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I see this all the time, not just from journalists, from all sorts of users. I think we've all been victim to you know, bad security practices, even if we know what we're doing. But I think just being vigilant, especially if you're at risk, is so important. And do more research, figure out, try to identify what your biggest concerns are. There's lots of tools out there. There's lots of interesting organizations that are working on this and that recommend tools. I think of like the Citizen Lab based out of Toronto, for example. There's some, you know, experts in the field that really work on providing recommendations for those most at risk. And so it would take extra time to connect with those organizations and figure out what you should be doing. And I think that there's things that you can be doing, and if you need more help, then there are some organizations out there that can be there for you.
No, that's great feedback, Jamie. Todd Gleason and a handful of other people had similar types of questions. I'm going to bundle a couple of these together. I think these all kind of fall into the category of like, if I'm using Google tools like Gmail or Drive, how confident can I be that those tools are secure, and that if I say, for example, get a Google Drive file sent to me, for example, and this is actually something I've seen myself in my own security or my own email, like where it comes in from a suspicious user, it's somebody that I don't necessarily recognize. It's like, oh, here, maybe it's in a different language. And it's like, oh, here, click on this document, or you know, check out this attachment, or check out this even Google Drive link to some degree. To me, this is more of like an awareness situation. It's like an understanding of how the tools work, kind of an approach. For me, at least, it's like if I get a file that isn't quite, it's a little bit fishy. Typically, what I'll do is I'll actually reach out to the user that originally sent it to me and say, or if I know them, and say like, hey, did you mean to send this thing to me? This looks a little bit weird. Is this legit? But you know, what are some other ways to think about this? And maybe to summarize that first part of that question, like how secure are these tools? Are these things that are these tools things that people can use with a relative sense of security, or should they be thinking about other things in addition to that?
Should I? I mean, the security level we can offer with these tools, based on the scale we are, based on the effort we're putting in, is very high. I think that's something industry experts always confirm. And when we look at the media reactions we had with the announcement of advanced protection, we also got this feedback again and again that we are considered as leading in this space. The second part of the question, I mean, Nicholas, you said it really well. If it looks fishy, it probably is. And then reach out to the person who sent it to you. And reach out to the person. Don't do anything One thing which happens with some of these attacks, they have similar workflows as the write flow would have, but they might have some changes. So for example, if you get a Google Doc and it asks you to sign in again, even if you're signed into Gmail and it asks for your second factor, look at it again and see if it's really an actual workflow you want to go through. So we don't ask on a every daily basis for your security key or for your second factor, but if you see that we ask for it in a situation where you wouldn't expect it, think about it twice if that's a situation you want to get yourself into.
Yeah, and I would add to that too, you know, especially if you think that you are potentially at risk, just having that extra layer of vigilance on top, I think is also just a good part of the approach to how to behave online. Jamie, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that as well?
No, I think that's was stated really well. But yeah, like even like you can sometimes see the URL. Check your URL, make sure that if you're using Chrome, you know, in the left-hand corner it says secure and there's a little lock. Just look out for those things. And there are other extensions that you can use, like HTTPS everywhere, which helps make your traffic secure. So there's all lots of things that you can be doing kind of on top of what we recommended. But yeah, again, like if you have any doubt in your mind, just don't do it. Don't open the document. Don't visit the link. If it is usually, you know, if like I just had this happen with one of my friends, she sent around a link, and everyone was like responded back to her being like, this looks really fishy, and so no one opened it, and so then she re-emailed everyone being like, no one worry, like this is a safe link. So it's like I didn't even bother opening it, and other people had that question. So it was actually nice to see that like other people this is becoming like a common sort of awareness. So if it is actually important, I'm sure someone will kind of get back to you and let you know, especially if you know them.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a couple more questions here, and then we'll be wrapping up. Conrad actually asks, and I think this is a similar kind of a question to what we've gotten in the past. You know, there are multiple different vectors of attack, and I think there's multiple different actors in this kind of space that might be trying to compromise your account or otherwise get information from you. Some reporters are working in environments where the government itself is perhaps a risk. How do these tools, particularly that we've kind of outlined today, kind of help protect against those types of scenarios as well?
I mean, they protect against attacks which are used by a variety of attackers. I mean, if it helps you against being phished through emails that require you to change your password, it doesn't matter who sends that email. It's the same type of protection. And as Jamie said in one of our slides, phishing emails are still surprisingly effective, especially if they're targeted. So we see highly skilled and highly resourced organizations who send out phishing emails, as well as people in their dorm room. So that the spectrum is the same. It doesn't really matter from where they come. It protects against these types of attacks if you follow the recommendations various documents and various organizations make.
Yeah, you know, I think, you know, if I'm not mistaken, it sounds like it's really more about the methodology versus, say, the actual source of the attack. You know, the methodologies are always evolving, they're always changing, but there's similarities, I think, between them. And I think that old analogy of like the weakest link in the chain is like the one you really have to be worrying about. I think a lot of these tools kind of address some of those weak links in the chain. A lot of times it's user error or just like user behavior, which is the weakest link. And I think there's a philosophical thing that needs to be addressed there. And just like, as we had mentioned before, good hygiene with passwords and just being a little bit suspicious about clicking on things. But these tools, I think, also help support that as well. Let's see, we have a couple more questions and then I think we'll be done for the day. Todd Gleason kind of clarified part of what his question was, and I think this is more about embeddable. So if you have like a Google Drive a file of some sort that you've embedded on another site that somebody wants to access, or you want to give access to people so that they could see like a table or a spreadsheet or something like that, or maybe it's a fusion table map or something along those lines. It's a similar question around the security of those types of embeddables, and is there a risk inherent there or things that people need to be considering when embedding, say, a Google Doc or another type of file that's originating from Google on their websites?
Not per se as a tool or as on a feature level. I think one of the conversation people have to have when they're sharing significant or relevant information with other people is they should be much more open and have security hygiene conversation with them. So for example, if you work in a team which might be distributed and works a lot with these tools and using these tools, have these conversations. Talk to your peers about how they protect their accounts, what they should do, what you expect from them to do in order to keep yourself and your information safe. I mean, it's similarly as you would do when in other areas in your life when you want other people to be cautious when you drive on a passenger seat with somebody. You want them to be attentive. You want to do the same in the digital life. As for journalists, especially, what we always recommend, talk to your sources, talk to the people you work with, talk to them, talk to your editors who have access to this information, and tell them that them being secure also makes you more secure.
That's great. And Jamie, any last thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say with things like Google Drive, for example, like there are a lot of really detailed features that are now included in Drive that can give you a lot of control about who you give access to. If this is really sensitive information, but you obviously need to share it, then you can set a time limit for how long you share it with that person. You could disable them from printing it or copying it and doing some of these things that might sort of lead to sort of a domino effect of the document kind of getting out of your hands in terms of you don't know who has access to it anymore. So I would say just be very cognizant of the features that you're like how you're sharing and who you're sharing with and for how long, and what they're able to do with the document once you share it with them to make sure that you have as much control as possible. And there are some really amazing features. So I would just kind of play around in that when you share files, and I would encourage you again to like have those conversations with people to make sure that you can have as much control as possible over a document as you feel is necessary for the sensitivity level.
Absolutely. And I think too, within the live chat here, there's a handful of people like Justin Ehrenstein from Code for Africa and other folks who have a lot of experience in these areas. They've been answering some of the questions also within the live chat. So Justin and others, thank you for that. This webinar and this whole entire presentation will be available on our YouTube channel after the live event is over in just a few minutes. Feel free to jump in and add additional questions or other information that you might have that's relevant to the conversation. I think for me, it's both talking to experts like Jamie and Dario. Again, thank you for your time today to kind of walk through some of these features with us. I think it's very important to make sure that you're connecting with folks like yourselves to find out information about what the current risk is, what options are available. But I think also it's about community. I think it's about talking with others that you work with, your colleagues, your sources, about some of the things that you're doing and making sure that everybody, like Dario, I think that analogy that uses is a perfect one. If somebody's driving a car, you want to make sure that they have their full attention on what they're doing. And I think the same thing is very true for online activity these days as well. So talk to your friends, family, coworkers, and everybody else. There's lots of references and links that we can share with you, both in the description and an upcoming blog post. But if you have additional questions, add them to the live chat. We will be taking a look at these questions after the fact and potentially putting together training materials for those specific questions that might be popping up. If you are interested in safety and security training on your own within your region, reach out to us at newslabsupport@google.com. We are exploring opportunities right now about scaling some of this training material. We are also going to have additional training material on our website at g.co/newslab in the form of lessons. So if you want to host a security assessment for your team or your classroom or your newsroom, we'll have resources available for you on there. And then as always, if you have questions, reach out to us, newslabsupport@google.com. Jamie and Dario, thank you again for taking time to walk through this stuff today. If folks are interested in reaching out to you with more questions, what's the best way for people to reach you, either through us or is there other means?
I think you guys from NewsLab have a very good trusting relationship with journalists, and whenever there is an opportunity to engage in a deeper conversation, please let us know.
Will do.
Same. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon and be safe out there.